Welcome to the Thea Lee podcast. It is January 15th, 2026, and we are on day 15 of reading through the Bible. So yesterday, we ended at the point where Joseph was put in prison, and he was put in charge of all the other prisoners and everything that happened in the prison. So today, it starts with talking about there was a time when the Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended the Pharaoh. And so the Pharaoh became angry with them and put them in prison. And then Joseph is assigned over them. While they were in prison, the cupbearer and the baker each had a dream on the same night. And so the next morning, Joseph saw them and they both looked really troubled. And so he asked what was wrong. And they each said that they had had troubling dreams the night before and they didn't know what they meant. Joseph said, interpreting dreams is God's business. Go ahead, tell me what happened. So the chief cupbearer tells Joseph about his dream. In his dream, he saw a grapevine in front of him, and the vine had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced clusters of ripe grapes. He was holding the Pharaoh's wine cup in his hand, so he took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then he placed the cup in the Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph answered, well, this is what it means. The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, the Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as the chief cupbearer. And when that happens, please remember me, he said. Give a good word to the Pharaoh for me, because I was kidnapped from my homeland, and now I'm in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it. So then the chief baker saw that went pretty well for the cupbearer, so he said, I'd like to tell you my dream. I had a dream too. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white pastries stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries for the Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head. This is what your dream means, Joseph said. The 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now, the Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. Then the birds of the air will come and peck away at your flesh. The Pharaoh's birthday was 3 days later, so he called all of his servants and staff in for a party, and he summoned his cupbearer and chief baker. He restored the chief cupbearer to his former position, but he impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. The cupbearer, however, forgot to tell the Pharaoh about Joseph. 2 years later, the Pharaoh dreamed, and he woke up the next morning from having 2 dreams, and he was really, really troubled. So he called in all of his wise men and magicians in Egypt and asked them to tell him what his dreams meant, but none of them could tell him what it meant. So finally, the king's cupbearer spoke up and said, today I have been reminded of my failure. And he said, some time ago, when you were angry with me and the baker and you sent us to prison, we both had dreams. And there was a young Hebrew man with us in prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard, and he was able to tell us exactly what our dreams meant. And then everything happened just as he had predicted, and I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. So the Pharaoh sent for Joseph immediately. Joseph went and shaved and changed his clothes, and he went and stood before the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh said, I had a dream last night that no one here can tell me what it means. But I've heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. But Joseph said, it is beyond my ability to do this, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. So the Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. In my dream, he said, I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing on the marsh grass. But then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, coming up after them. I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows then ate the 7 fat cows, but afterwards you wouldn't have known it because they were still thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. Then I fell asleep again, and I had another dream. This time I saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then the 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted and shriveled and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed up the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to my magicians, but no one could tell me what they meant. So Joseph responded that both of the Pharaoh's dreams meant the same thing, that God was telling him in advance what God was about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain, withered by the east wind, represented 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to you in advance what he's about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout Egypt. But after that, there will be 7 years of famine, and it will be so bad that all the prosperity will be forgotten about in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be cleared. As for having the two similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God and they will soon happen. Therefore, the pharaohs should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then the pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and have them collect 1/5 of all of the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food that is produced in the good years and put it in the pharaoh's storehouses and store it away and guard it, so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come into the land. Otherwise, the famine is going to destroy the land. Joseph's suggestions were really well received, so the pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man who is so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?" So he tells Joseph that he thinks he is really wise and that he is obviously the one who is the most intelligent and who should be in charge of everything. And he said, "I'm the only one sitting on the throne that will be above you. So nothing is going to happen in my country without you saying it should happen." He put him in charge of the entire land, gave him his signet ring, he dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. And then Joseph had to ride in the chariot reserved for the second in command. Whenever he went anywhere, they would command everyone to kneel down. So he was put in charge of all of Egypt. Then the pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphenath-Paneah. He gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. And then he took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of the pharaoh. As predicted, there were 7 years of bumper crops. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops in Egypt and stored them in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain, so much that they finally stopped counting because it couldn't be counted anymore. During that time, Joseph had 2 sons. His oldest son he named Manasseh because he said, "God has made me forget all of my troubles and everyone in my father's house." And then his second son he named Ephraim because he said, "God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief." At last the 7 years of bumper crops ended, and they started the 7 years of famine. Just as he had predicted, it struck all the surrounding countries, and throughout Egypt there was plenty of food. But eventually, the famine spread throughout Egypt, and the people started to cry to the Pharaoh for food. Joseph started opening up the storehouses and distributing the grain. People from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was so severe throughout the entire world. Then it also says, on a side note, that Isaac lived to 180 years, and then he breathed his last, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So today, I think what I'm struck with is the fact, first of all, that obviously the Lord is with Joseph, and Joseph is so loyal and faithful to God that he is able to interpret dreams. And obviously he's still being just a man of good character and hard work and wisdom because he's now in charge of the entire land of Egypt. But at the end, we see that this hasn't been easy for him. So emotionally, he was really struggling and he was still really hurt. When his first son was born, he said, "God has made me forget my troubles and everyone in my father's family." And then his second son, "God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief." Obviously, emotionally, he wasn't okay. He was really struggling, but he didn't let that stop the fact that he worked hard and he worked with character and he trusts the Lord. God really blessed everything he did. In our lives, we need to know the same. When we have times that are really troubling and difficult, do we still keep walking with character and integrity and still put our 100% effort into everything we're doing? Because God will bless that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk tomorrow.